Hey everyone, Crow back here again to talk a bit about the 8 games included in the Evercade's very first arcade collection, Technos Arcade 1. Technos was originally founded in 1981 by 3 employees of Data East, with some of their most popular games being Renegade, the Double Dragon series, and the Kunio-kun series. The company was well known for its beat-em-ups, though there is a bit of variety in the games they did create. In 1996, Technos declared bankruptcy, and their back catalog is currently owned by Arc System Works. As usual, I'll briefly talk about each game in the collection, whether or not I like the game, and afterwards I'll rank them from my least favorite to my most favorite. So, let's get started.
First up is the oddly named Battle Lane Volume 5, which was released in 1986 by Taito. Taito? Isn't this supposed to be a Technos collection of arcade games? Well, Technos did create the game, but then licensed it to Taito for release in Japan. Then Taito licensed the game to Tecmo, who then licensed it to Romstar for release in North America. Well, at least that's the way I understand it. Apparently this type of thing was commonplace for arcade games that weren't perceived as being big hits. In the game, you're on your motorcycle blasting your way through the enemy defenses with your machine gun and missiles to get to the base in order to destroy their secret weapon. There are 5 levels in total, and at the end of each level, you'll have to get off your motorbike and destroy the blockade with 5 missiles before proceeding on to the next level. Hey, do you think that's what the 5 in the title is referencing? Well, anyway, I found this game to be insanely difficult to play. The only reason you're seeing halfway decent gameplay footage right now is because I had to totally abuse save states, and then I edited the footage. Actually, I do that for most of these Evercade videos, but this was ridiculous because I had to create a save state every 2 to 5 seconds just to make progress, since one hit would kill you and send you back to the last checkpoint. At first, my problem was that my bullets are very difficult to see on the screen, as they would often blend into the background. But the bullets from the enemy vehicles were fine for the most part, as they would be a little bit bigger and flash as well. So with a bit of practice, it was totally doable. I actually liked how you could take out individuals in the vehicle. You know, like take out the passengers and that's one less character shooting at you. But take out the driver and the vehicle goes out of control and crashes. You just have to be careful it doesn't swerve into you and take you out as well. However, when you reach the blockade at the end of the level, you'll have to get off your bike and destroy the wall with 5 missiles. But the problem is that all the soldiers are now on foot, and all of their bullets look exactly like yours, and it's difficult to see any of the bullets on the screen. And there could be over 10 soldiers firing at you all at once, so there were like bullets all around me, and yet they were all very hard to see. So doing the best I could, I just kept dodging the bullets and firing missiles at the wall, and nothing seemed to be happening. So I did have to do some research, and I found that you need to first kill a few soldiers before you can actually break through the wall. Why? I have no idea why. The game doesn't indicate you have to do this at all. Fortunately, if you run out of missiles, there's usually a guy with a missile launcher that comes out, and if you kill him, you can replenish your stock a little. So you finally break through the wall, and the cycle repeats for every stage, but with progressively harder vehicles and obstacles in the driving sections and harder blockades to get through at the end of each level. Now, I really didn't like this game, mainly due to the game's difficulty and the difficulty I had in seeing the bullets. But what really frustrated me is that I got to the secret weapon at the end of the game, and I was put into a situation where it was impossible to win. You see, you need to hit the secret weapon with 10 missiles to destroy it, and if you get to that screen with less than 10 missiles, well, then you're screwed, because as far as I can tell, there's no way to get more missiles on that screen. Every single time in the game where you need missiles to progress, you have a way to get them, except at the final boss. There's no missile guy that shows up here. So doesn't matter how many lives you have left, you'll eventually lose them all and get sent back to the title screen. Had I known I needed 10 missiles, I could have stocked up on the previous screen, but I found out too late, and the game being an absolute bastard locked me out from completing the game. There's probably no way I'll ever change my mind about this one. Developed by California Dreams and released in 1989 by Technos, Blockout seems to me to be the result of someone thinking, what if we took Tetris and made it 3D?
You'll be rotating and dropping differently shaped pieces down a hole, and every level that gets completely filled in will disappear and drop the blocks above that level. The game ends when the blocks reach the top of the hole. So yeah, a bit like 3D Tetris, but with some extra stuff that attempts to break up the monotony a bit. The game is broken up into levels. Each level has a different sized well in length, width, and depth, and also has a different set of blocks that can potentially appear for you to place. When you clear out a predetermined amount of levels, you'll advance to the next one. There's also the Blockmaster, who I suppose you're playing against, although not really. At the beginning of the game, he'll appear and challenge you, but then only shows up in between levels to say the same thing over and over again.
You are worthy of it, but I won't lose the next game.
The only other time he appears is when you clear all the blocks in the well, then he'll appear and say,
Blah.
and then disappear again. Every 5 levels there's a timed bonus level that has you placing blocks quickly in an incredibly small well. I tried to figure out if there was an ending to the game, and I read somewhere that there are 100 levels, but I couldn't actually find any evidence of that. So I have no idea if you can completely defeat the Blockmaster, but it'll easily take several hours to make it to level 100. Fortunately, if you fail a level, it looks like you can retry by continuing as many times as you want, but your score does reset when you do continue. There is a 2-player mode in this game, which I did not play, but it seems to work similar to the 2-player modes in Tetris, where clearing levels on your side adds levels to your opponent's side. The winner is the one left after the opponent completely fills his well, or is the first one to clear 21 levels. This was a game I played on MS-DOS back in the 90s, and I thought the visuals of the game were pretty cool. And that's all I really remember thinking about this game. I wasn't even aware that this was a port of an arcade game. In playing it again here on the Evercade, I kinda remember being a bit frustrated with the game. You see, Tetris is a simple game. Only 7 pieces, 2 ways to rotate them, and you can clearly see everything in the well. If you make a mistake, it's usually something you can correct. When you take Tetris and add another dimension, things get a lot more complicated. Frustrations usually begin with piece rotation because now they rotate on 3 different axes instead of just one. And with 3 buttons to spin the piece, it can be easy to mistakenly rotate a piece the wrong way, and when that happens, I usually have to struggle to figure out how to fix the piece to be in the position I want it to be. The pieces will only rotate in one direction on each axis, so there's no button to hit to reverse the spin. It really takes a while to get a grasp on how each piece will rotate with each of the 3 buttons. Once you get a handle on that, there'll still be a problem with some of the more complicated pieces you'll get later in the game, since it'll be hard to determine where exactly some of the points are sticking out. And sometimes you'll place a piece down in the well thinking it's filling a specific spot when in fact it's not, only to be surprised when you place a piece down later and the level doesn't disappear. And I know the game gives you pieces randomly, but there were a few occasions where I had to place the same complicated piece 10 times in a row, and I think that'll easily frustrate anybody. But oddly enough, with everything I've just said, I do kind of like this one. It's a challenge for sure in both control and spatial recognition, but I found that I'd played it for 2 hours straight without even realizing it. I may have gotten a bit frustrated and swore at the game more than a few times, mostly because I kept hitting the wrong button or couldn't figure out how to rotate the piece to be in a position I wanted it to be in, but it was never enough for me to stop playing.
You are worthy of it, but I won't lose.
Next up, the Combatribes, released by Technos in 1990, is a beat-em-up for up to 3 players. Berserker, Belova, and Blitz are out to confront several gangs in their quest to find their kidnapped former member, Martha Splatterhead. They'll have to go through the motorcycle nuclear warheads, the demon clowns, the slash skate screamers, the stadium barbarians, and the slaughter troops before they'll find her. The controls for the game are pretty simple. Just an 8-way joystick and 2 buttons are needed, one for punch attacks and the other for kick attacks. With these controls, you'll be able to do a variety of attacks, pick ups and throw certain items, and even attack down enemies in a variety of ways. In each level, you'll beat up waves of gang members before their boss will show up to challenge you. You'll proceed on to the next level after defeating that boss. 1 credit will give you a certain amount of health.
but you could load up the game on credits and just push the start button repeatedly and use up all the credits to keep adding more to your health. But no matter how much health you give yourself, the game will eliminate you if you don't finish the level before the countdown timer hits 0. However, you can just insert more virtual coins for more credits and continues if you want, but I honestly don't know what the point of the countdown timer is. I'd actually be more than a little peeved if I put a bunch of money in an arcade machine only for the game to kill me off and waste all my money if I didn't beat the level in time. But obviously on the Evercade that isn't that big of a deal, it's just an odd annoyance. Other than that, I felt the characters didn't really control the greatest either, especially after you get your guy running. It's very difficult to stop and turn them around, or maybe you'll rush into an enemy on the ground hoping to get some extra hits in while they're immobilized, but I was never really able to stop accurately, and I always had to fiddle a bit to get my guy lined up properly for an attack. But often the guy would just get back up before I could do anything. I also thought it was a bit strange that the enemies would drop their weapons if hit hard enough, but then it'll just disappear and you nor anyone else can pick it up and use it. In fact, you really just can't use weapons at all in general. You'll just be able to throw the occasional background object. The bosses can also get annoying, as it seems that their attacks always takes priority over yours, and it's often difficult to get away from them or react to their attacks. It doesn't help that the final level is a boss rush, and the final boss? Holy hell, I certainly took a beating there. Now this definitely isn't one of the greatest beat-em-ups of all time, but I still think it has its charms and its own personality. The characters are big and detailed with a cartoony style, and they're all animated pretty well, especially with the grabbing type of moves. And despite being a bit overwhelmed by the final boss in the game, I thought it was pretty awesome, as there's a twist at the end of the game that I won't spoil here. I can honestly say that I liked this one in the end. And oh yeah, if you're playing this on the Evercade VS, I highly recommend using an arcade stick for this one. Playing on the standard controller really started cramping my hands before the first level was even over. Double Dragon 2: The Revenge was released in 1988, and it's the sequel to the popular Double Dragon, which isn't featured in this collection for some reason. Billy and Jimmy are back in this beat-em-up that has them out for revenge after Marion is murdered in the game's intro. You'll punch and kick your way through 4 levels on your way to take out the leader of the Black Warriors, Willie Mackey. Wait a minute, is the title referring to Billy and Jimmy taking revenge for Marion's murder? Or is it referring to Willie Mackey's act of killing Marion as revenge for being defeated in the first Double Dragon game? Well, I guess it might be both. Anyway, the game plays a bit differently than most beat-em-ups in that there are separate buttons for attacking left and attacking right. And that just means that you'll always attack in that direction regardless of what way you're facing. Now, some people don't like this button scheme, but I actually do kind of like it. To round things up, there's a third button for jumping, and in using the jump and attack buttons, you'll be able to perform a variety of attacks and also pick up and use various objects and weapons on the ground. I don't know how this controls in a gamepad because I was just using an arcade stick the whole time, and well, it played pretty well, but only because I was able to remap the buttons. It would have been a different story if I couldn't. You get 3 lives per credit, but you'll be able to continue anytime you want as long as you have credits in the game. You'll just have your score reset back to 0 when you do continue. I really haven't gotten into this one before, but when I first started playing this, I was completely getting beaten into the ground. It took me about 5 or 6 continues before I realized the best way to attack was to approach your enemies diagonally, as this will usually let you attack first and knock them to the ground before they can do anything. Even doing that, there were still a few enemies that I really took a beating from, not to mention the plenty of cliffs that I just fell off of accidentally. When you lose a life and come back, it seemed like your invincibility state was very short, and it didn't seem like you could inflict any damage either, which I thought was weird. The game plays at a pretty good speed, but there were a few times where there was severe slowdown, and I don't believe it had anything to do with the emulation on the Evercade. That's just how the game is. But overall, I'd say I'd like this one. I did have some trouble in certain spots, but I'd probably do better again if I gave this game a few more playthroughs. The music is probably the game's best feature, though. Following Double Dragon 2 is the radically different Double Dragon 3, the Rosetta Stone. This arcade game was developed by East Technology and released by Technos in 1990. Like Combatribes, up to 3 players can play simultaneously. This game was very controversial upon release due to the shops that can be visited that would sell you extra lives, more energy, more strength, and even extra moves for more credits. Meaning that someone who spends more money on the game would be at a greater advantage. This feature proved to be so unlikable that it was removed for the Japanese release. On the Evercade, however, it's the US version. So even though there are shops in there, it doesn't cost you anything to upgrade your character other than a few extra button pushes. The story is that Billy and Jimmy run across a fortune teller who tells them that in order to challenge the world's strongest, they must seek out 3 Rosetta Stones. So they go off on a worldwide adventure across 5 missions, punching and kicking anyone in their way. But they aren't alone, as they are now joined by their previously unheard of brother Sonny, as well as 3 other sets of 3 brothers. And I'll have to explain this because it's kind of bizarre. You see, player 1 controls Billy, player 2 controls Jimmy, and player 3 controls Sonny. If you die and continue, you still continue as those characters. However, if you purchase extra lives in one of the shops, when you die, you'll automatically continue as one of the other sets of the brothers. So the extra lives are really just the other characters aside from the Lee brothers. And each set of brothers have different moves. The only way to play as those characters is to purchase extra lives, and then you can't even play as them until after your main character dies. Since the Japanese version did away with those shops, it just lets you choose whoever you want from the beginning of the game. The controls are also back to a more conventional setup with an 8-way joystick and 3 buttons for punching, kicking, and jumping. So, with all that out of the way, what did I think about this game? Well, I've seen footage of it and I've never really played it before, but based on what I saw, I didn't really think this game would play that well. And you know what? I was completely wrong. It's far worse than I thought it would be. And I'm not even putting the whole microtransactional garbage into the equation because, well, it doesn't even really matter here on the Evercade. The problem is that the characters' movements are incredibly jittery. It's like watching poorly done stop animation. I put this game footage into my video editor and noticed that the characters sometimes move at the blistering pace of 6 frames per second. I'll repeat that. 6 frames per second. But it's also bizarrely inconsistent. Your character will run at 10 frames per second, but then when you jump, it's all very smooth. And all the characters on the screen are all animating at different paces simultaneously. It all looks very strange, but the main effect this all has is that your control feels very laggy and sometimes the button inputs just aren't registered. If I do a jump kick and wind up behind an enemy, my reaction is to quickly turn around and start punching. But the joystick motion never registers and I immediately start punching in the wrong direction, guaranteeing that I'll be hit from behind. Several times during the game, I've been knocked to the ground, and I don't have a chance to do anything after getting back up because I'll just get knocked right back down again. This kind of thing seems to happen very frequently during the later boss battles in the game. Not only does it run poorly, it also seems to be designed in a way to be unfair to the player, probably in an attempt to get you to insert more coins for more lives and energy and so forth. If you don't purchase extra lives, you only get 1 life, and every time you die, you've got to put another coin in to continue. And when you continue, you don't have any invincibility time to get your bearings straight. Nope, your character can just get beat on the second he reappears on the screen. So to recap, the game looks like it's constantly stuttering, the controls don't feel all that responsive, and the odds really feel stacked against the player. I found the game annoying and frustrating, and I really didn't like this one. In 1985, Technos released a wrestling game by the name of Mania, which featured 6 wrestlers. However, it was only for 1 player. 1 year later, in 1986, Technos released the follow-up, Mania Challenge, which is the game included in this collection and what you're looking at right now. It's almost exactly the same game, except now 2 players are able to play against each other, and it also has 1 additional wrestler, and I think there was also a move that was added. However, 3 wrestlers from Mania were removed. Well, it kind of sucks that in this game there's only 3 opponents to fight against, but it's understandable why this game was included instead of Mania, since that game doesn't let 2 players play against each other. Now, in both games, you don't get to choose who you want to play as. In Mania and in the single-player mode in Mania Challenge, you can only play as Dynamite Tommy, and in Mania Challenge, the second player will always be Hurricane Joe. A 2-player game is always a 1 versus 1 match, with the players fighting against each other, but the 1-player mode has you cycling through the roster, and for Mania Challenge, that's only 3 characters: Insane Warrior, Golden Hulk, and Hurricane Joe in that order. If you beat Hurricane Joe, you just repeat the cycle until you lose. So now at this point, I'm having to re-record the rest of the audio because most of what I said originally is no longer valid. You see, I eventually discovered that a broken version of the game's ROM was included in this collection, and I discovered this when I was thrown out of the ring and I couldn't figure out how to get back in. In trying to figure this out, I discovered that it was not possible to get back in the ring with this broken version of the game, and not only that, but many of the moves were missing as well. I spent the rest of my time complaining about these issues and ultimately saying I couldn't like a game that was broken to the point of not really being playable. But then there was a firmware update around February 10th, and this game was completely fixed, which is great, but now it means that I need to re-edit this part of the video. So I went back and I replayed this game a bit more and found that yes, there are more moves and you can now get back into the ring. I was having a bit more fun, and I can no longer say that I don't like this game, but I really can't say that I do like it either. You're stuck playing as 1 wrestler, and there's only 3 other wrestlers to play as. It's interesting to mess around and see what moves you can pull off, but I start to get a bit tired of the game before the end of the first match. It seems to take forever to pin your opponent, and while that just may be me being terrible at the game, I don't really know if I'd want to invest the time to get better. Released in Japanese arcades in 1982, Minky Monkey is a game where you control a boy that follows the instructions of one monkey, while another monkey tries to stop you from completing those instructions any way it can. And that's about the extent of the story of this game that I can find out. I think the Minky Monkey is referring to the one that's trying to make you fail, but I couldn't find out what the story of the game is. What's the reason you're following the instructions of the other monkey? It's not really explained in-game, and the whole scenario is just a bit bizarre. Anyway, the game reminds me a little of Donkey Kong Jr. in that you're primarily climbing up and down and there's fruit involved, but that's about the extent of the similarities. Every level has a different layout, but they all have one long pole on both the right and the left sides of the screen, and one fruit that will appear on each. The monkey at the top of the screen will write out directions like bring down strawberry, or bring up grapes, and bring down cherries. After directions are fully written out, boxes will appear on the screen indicating where you need to move the fruit to succeed. You'll need to succeed 5 times to move on to the next level. Fail 5 times though, and you'll lose a life. If that was all there is to it, this game would be a bit too easy, though some of the platforming can be a little bit difficult due to how the boy jumps. Now, what makes this game incredibly difficult is the monkey that tries to make you fail. I feel he has way more power to make you fail than I think he should. You see, he knows what you're trying to do, so he'll head straight for the fruit you need to move. If he gets there before you, he'll throw it on the ground and you'll fail that instruction. Not only that, but when there are no fully written instructions on the screen, he'll go directly after you, and if you touch him, you lose a life. If that wasn't bad enough, if he has the opportunity, he'll throw something at you from across the screen. I have no idea what that's supposed to be, but it'll also kill you. The only defense you'll have against the monkey is the bottle of soda that will occasionally appear in each level. Get the soda and you'll turn red for a while, and in this state, if the monkey touches you, he'll be put out of commission for a little while before he comes back. Another thing you can do that'll help you out a little is the fact that you can carry both fruits at the same time. In the end, I'm pretty much neutral on this game. I've not played it before and I thought the whole premise was interesting, but I think the monkey chasing you has too much power to make you fail. There are some instances where you simply can't succeed. If the instructions are written and the monkey is closer to the fruit than you, well, you're just simply gonna fail that task, although perhaps it's by design that it's impossible to succeed every time. Maybe it's just all about limiting the number of times you do fail. Mysterious Stones is the final game in this collection, and it was released in Japanese arcades in 1984. Daddy East had originally planned to release this game in US arcades, but that never happened. You play as Dr. John as he travels to various temples all over the world in search of treasure. On a side note though, there's an older version of this game that calls him Dr. Kick, and honestly, I think that's a much better name for this dude. Well, maybe his full name is Dr. John Kick. Well, regardless, you'll be exploring those temples, breaking objects in every room by kicking them. I mean, hey, he wasn't called Dr. Kick for nothing. You'll also collect artifacts while avoiding or shooting the guardians in the room. You'll also need to find and defeat the creature with the key in order to unlock the doors and proceed to another room. But this must be done before the floor collapses, sending you into the lava below. Ultimately, the goal is to find the treasure room and select one of the treasures and escape the temple before 8 a.m. The most interesting aspect of the game for me was the kicking mechanic, because kicking most objects doesn't cause them to simply break. When you kick an object, it'll fly forward until it hits something hard, and then it'll return back to its original location. Doing this twice will completely destroy an object, revealing what was inside, whether it be an artifact, a monster, or even a creature that can help you. However, if you kick an object and it flies into another object, it'll start a chain reaction that'll continue until the object in motion hits something solid, and then the whole chain reaction will reverse until everything is back to where it originally was. I thought this was a really fun part of the game because it lets you damage or destroy several objects with one kick. It can also help clear a path, giving you more room to maneuver around the room, and any guardians that happen to be in the path of a moving object will be temporarily eliminated. You've got to be careful though, because if you get hit with a moving object yourself, you'll be knocked into one of the four corners of the room. Early in the game, this usually isn't so bad, but some rooms in later temples have statues that shoot fire all around the room, especially all around the edges, so accidentally hitting yourself with an object you kicked will send you right into the fire and you'll lose a life. It's also very important to find the treasure and escape before 8 a.m. because if you fail, it'll be game over regardless of how many lives you have left. I hadn't played this one before, and once I learned that you had to find and defeat the monster with the key to escape the locked rooms, I had a blast with this one. This game had several things I liked. The kicking mechanic to send the objects flying around the room I thought was just great, and I enjoyed the mystery of what those objects contained. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it the monster with the key so I can escape? The thing that surprised me was that Dr. John Kick has unlimited bullets. I really thought in a game like this your ammo would be limited and you'd have to find more as you explored, but it's not something you have to worry about. And then finally, when you make it to the treasure room and you have to choose one of the treasures to take back with you, and then after you escape, there's that scene where the object is being appraised, and the whole time you're wondering how many points you'll get for it. I don't know if the point values for the treasures are always the same for every playthrough, or if they're always random, but either way, it'll be fun figuring that out. I really like this game. It has action, a bit of a puzzle element, and suspense.
And that's all 8 games in Technos Arcade 1. My least favorite of the lot has gotta be Battle Lane Volume 5. Not only did I think the game was brutally punishing, but what really tipped it over the edge for me was the fact that you could make it to the last screen of the game and yet not be able to win if you didn't have enough missiles when you got there. At number 7 is Double Dragon 3, the Rosetta Stone. Not only does this game offer an advantage to players who spend a little bit more money, but the game's choppy and inconsistent frame rate make this one an utter mess to even look at. Number 6 is Minky Monkey, a game I neither liked nor disliked. It's just a bit annoying that you can fail a task with absolutely no chance to succeed in some cases. The Minky Monkey is a monkey with no remorse. At number 5 is Mania Challenge. This would have been much lower on the list if it hadn't been fixed via a firmware update before I finished making this video, but even in its fixed form with only 4 wrestlers total, the matches start repeating after only 3 rounds and it really doesn't give me much reason to hang around. Entering the top half of the list at number 4 is the Combatribes, a pretty fun beat 'em up with plenty of moves, but sometimes it can be utterly brutal. At number 3 I have Double Dragon 2, The Revenge. It was honestly a bit of a toss-up between this one and the Combatribes, but I do feel like I like this one just a little bit more, and maybe just because you can pick up weapons in this game. At number 2 is surprisingly Blockout. For whatever reason, I recalled this game being boring when I played the computer version many years ago, but this one really held my interest level after level. The only problem is that sometimes it can be hard to decipher how the blocks are orientated. And finally, at number 1 is Mysterious Stones. Easily the most fun game in the collection where you raid tombs, find treasure, and escape with it. The only issue really is that it can be hard to know what to do without a bit of instruction, and neither the game nor the Evercade manual provides any information on that. And that wraps it up for Technos Arcade 1. Next Evercade video will be the second arcade collection, Data East Arcade 1. See you then.